The sound of someone trying to unlock my front door at 7 a.m. made my blood run cold. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I definitely hadn't given anyone keys to my house. I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds, and what I saw made my heart pound with anger and disbelief. Before you watch complete story, comment down from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. There she was, Sandra Mitchell, our neighborhood's self-appointed HOA queen, standing on my porch with a key in her hand, trying to get into my house like she owned the place. When the key wouldn't turn, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I need police assistance immediately," she said in that fake panicked voice I'd come to hate. "Someone has changed the locks on my rental property without permission. I'm the property manager and I can't access the unit for maintenance." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My rental property? I'd owned this house for 3 years, bought it fair and square with my own money. But Sandra was spinning a complete lie to the 911 operator, and she had no idea who was about to answer her call. You see, my son Mike works as a 911 dispatcher for our city. He'd been doing the job for 5 years and loved helping people in real emergencies. But Sandra's call was about to land right in his lap, and she was about to get the shock of her life. I grabbed my phone and quickly texted Mike, "Sandra Mitchell from my neighborhood is about to call 911 with a fake story about my house. Whatever you do, just listen and don't let her know we're related." My phone buzzed back immediately. "Already got the call, Dad. She's claiming she owns your house. Want me to have some fun with this?" "Go for it," I texted back. "Record everything if you can." I pressed my ear to the door to hear Sandra's side of the conversation, while Mike later told me what was happening on his end. "Ma'am, can you provide the property address for me?" Mike asked in his professional dispatcher voice. Sandra rattled off my address with complete confidence. "The tenant has been problematic for months. Multiple HOA violations, refuses to maintain the property according to community standards. I need officers to assist with the eviction process." "And you said you're the property manager? Can you provide your company name and contact information?" "Mitchell Property Management," Sandra said without hesitation. "I've been managing this property for the homeowner for 2 years." I almost laughed out loud. Mitchell Property Management existed only in Sandra's imagination, just like her authority over my house. "Ma'am, I'm going to need officers to verify your identity and property management credentials before we can assist with any eviction procedures. Can you remain on scene until they arrive?" "Of course," Sandra said smugly. "I have all the necessary documentation right here." Through the blinds, I watched her dig through her oversized purse, probably looking for whatever fake documents she'd prepared for this moment. 20 minutes later, 2 police cars pulled up to my house. Officers Johnson and Martinez stepped out, and I could see Sandra straightening her blazer and putting on her most authoritative expression. I opened my door before anyone could knock. "Good morning, officers. I'm David Thompson and I own this house. I believe there's been some confusion about a 911 call." Officer Johnson looked between me and Sandra. "Sir, we received a call about a property management dispute. This lady claims she has legal authority over this residence." Sandra stepped forward with a folder full of papers. "Officers, I'm Sandra Mitchell, property manager for this address. Mr. Thompson here is a problematic tenant who's been violating lease terms and community standards. I need assistance gaining entry to assess property damage and begin eviction procedures." "Ma'am, do you have a copy of the lease agreement and property management contract?" Officer Martinez asked. Sandra's confidence wavered for just a second, but she quickly recovered. "All documentation is back at my office. But I can assure you, I have complete legal authority over this property." "Actually, officers," I said, pulling out my own folder, "I have the deed to this house right here along with my mortgage statements and property tax records. I purchased this house 3 years ago and I've never had any landlord or property manager." Officer Johnson examined my documents carefully. "Sir, these appear to be legitimate ownership papers. Ma'am, without proper documentation, we can't assist with any property management claims." Sandra's face was turning red. "This is ridiculous. I'm the HOA president. I have authority over all properties in this community." "Ma'am, HOA authority doesn't include property management or eviction procedures," Officer Martinez explained patiently. "If you have legitimate concerns about HOA violations, those need to be handled through proper legal channels. I demand you arrest this man for trespassing on my managed property." Sandra's voice was getting shrill. "Ma'am, he's provided proof of ownership. If you can't provide documentation supporting your claims, we'll need to consider this a false police report." That's when Sandra made her biggest mistake. I don't need documentation. I'm Sandra Mitchell. I've been running this community for 4 years. Everyone knows my authority. Officer Johnson exchanged a look with his partner. Ma'am, you're going to need to come with us to the station to discuss this false report. As they led Sandra to the police car, she was screaming about property rights and HOA authority and how she'd have everyone's jobs. The whole neighborhood was watching from their windows and doorways. Some looked shocked, others seemed relieved, and a few were clearly enjoying the show. After the officers left with Sandra, I called Mike at work. Dad, that was the most entertaining call I've taken all year, he laughed. She spent 20 minutes describing all the violations you've committed and how she's been trying to help the property owner deal with a difficult tenant. What happens now? I asked. Well, she's being charged with filing a false police report and attempted trespassing. Plus, I recorded the entire call as standard procedure. If she tries to claim this was some kind of misunderstanding, we have her own words proving she knowingly lied to emergency services. But Sandra's arrest was just the beginning. As word spread through the neighborhood about what had happened, other residents started coming forward with their own stories about Sandra's abuse of power. Mrs. Chun from 2 houses down knocked on my door that afternoon. David, I'm so glad someone finally stood up to her. She's been terrorizing our family for months. Mrs. Chun told me how Sandra had been fining them for excessive decorative lighting because they'd put up string lights for their daughter's birthday party. When they refused to pay the $200 fine, Sandra had called code enforcement claiming they were running an illegal business from their home. She told the inspector we were operating a party rental company, Mrs. Chin said, shaking her head. All because we had birthday decorations up for one weekend. The next day, Tom Rodriguez from across the street stopped by with his own story. That woman has been making my life hell, he said. She fined me $500 for unauthorized vehicle storage because I parked my work truck in my own driveway overnight. Tom worked construction and needed his truck for his job, but Sandra had declared that commercial vehicles violated the community's residential aesthetic standards. When Tom pointed out that several neighbors had similar work trucks, Sandra had threatened to fine them too if he didn't comply. She said if I didn't pay the fine and move my truck, she'd have it towed, Tom continued. I was about to give in just to avoid the hassle, but now I'm thinking maybe I should fight back. As more neighbors shared their stories, a pattern emerged. Sandra had been systematically targeting anyone who didn't immediately bow to her authority. She'd invented rules that didn't exist, imposed fines that had no legal basis, and threatened consequences she had no power to enforce. The breaking point came when the Johnsons, a young couple with twin toddlers, told me what Sandra had done to them. She called Child Protective Services on us, Mrs. Johnson said, tears in her eyes. She told them we were neglecting our children because they were playing in our backyard without shoes. Our own fenced backyard, Mr. Johnson added angrily. She said barefoot children violated health and safety standards. CPS had to waste time investigating a completely false report because of her lies. That's when I decided Sandra needed to face consequences beyond just the police charges. I called my brother-in-law Marcus, who's a lawyer specializing in HOA disputes and property law. Marcus, I need help dealing with a fake HOA president who's been terrorizing our entire neighborhood. After I explained the situation, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he started laughing. David, do you realize what you've got here? This woman has been impersonating an official, collecting money under false pretenses, filing false police reports, and harassing multiple families. She's looking at serious criminal charges, not to mention civil liability. What can we do? Well, first we need to document everything. Get statements from all the neighbors she's targeted. Collect copies of all her fake fines and threats. Then we're going to sue her into next week for harassment, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Marcus was right. Once we started digging into Sandra's operation, we discovered she'd been collecting HOA dues from 12 families in our neighborhood, totaling over $18,000 per year. She'd also been issuing fines averaging $300 per household per month, with some families paying thousands in bogus penalties. But here's the thing, our neighborhood had never actually formed a legal HOA. The developer had included language in the original deeds about potential future community standards, but no HOA had ever been officially established. Sandra had simply declared herself president of an organization that didn't exist. She's been running a criminal enterprise disguised as community management, Marcus explained. Every dollar she collected was obtained through fraud. We organized a real community meeting, not one of Sandra's fake HOA gatherings, but an actual neighborhood assembly to discuss what had been happening. 23 families showed up, and every single one had been targeted by Sandra's scams. The Patels had paid over $2,000 in fake fines for inappropriate window treatments, because Sandra didn't like their curtains. The Smiths had been forced to repaint their house twice because Sandra kept claiming the color was non-compliant with standards that didn't exist. The elderly Williamses had given Sandra $3,000 for emergency landscape maintenance. That never happened. She told us the money was going into a community fund for neighborhood improvements, Mr. Williams said sadly. We're on a fixed income, but we didn't want to be the ones causing problems for everyone else. As the stories poured out, the full scope of Sandra's operation became clear. She'd been psychologically manipulating vulnerable residents, threatening legal action she couldn't take, and collecting money for services she never provided. It was a sophisticated fraud scheme targeting her own neighbors. But Sandra wasn't done yet. 3 days after her arrest, she was back in the neighborhood, apparently having made bail. And she was angrier than ever. I was washing my car in my driveway when she marched up to me, practically vibrating with rage. This isn't over, Thompson. You think you can destroy everything I've built here? I'll show you what real power looks like. Sandra, you were arrested for filing false police reports. Maybe it's time to accept that your fake HOA days are over. Fake? She screamed. I've been protecting this community for 4 years. Property values, community standards, neighborhood safety. That's all because of my leadership. Leadership of what? There is no HOA, Sandra. There never was. There will be, she said with a chilling smile. I'm calling an emergency election meeting. Every homeowner in this neighborhood will vote to officially establish the Maplewood Community Association, and I'll be the first elected president. Then we'll see who has authority around here. I almost felt sorry for her. Sandra was so delusional that even arrest and criminal charges hadn't shaken her belief in her own power. She was doubling down on the fantasy instead of facing reality. But Sandra's emergency election meeting turned into the final nail in her coffin. She'd sent official-looking notices to every house in the neighborhood, demanding attendance at what she called a mandatory community governance session. The meeting was held in the local community center, and Sandra had gone all out. She'd set up a registration table, prepared ballots, and even brought a podium borrowed from somewhere. She was wearing her fanciest business suit and had her hair done like she was running for mayor. Welcome, fellow residents, to this historic evening, she began as people filed in. Tonight we establish the legal framework that will protect our community for generations to come. What Sandra didn't know was that Marcus had been busy too. He'd contacted every resident beforehand, explaining their legal rights and Sandra's complete lack of authority. He'd also invited Detective Rivera, who'd been investigating Sandra's fraud scheme. Before we begin any voting, I said, standing up from my seat, I think everyone should understand what's really been happening in our neighborhood. Sandra's face went pale. Mr. Thompson, you're out of order. This is an official community meeting and you haven't been recognized to speak. Official according to who? I asked. Sandra, you have no authority to run elections or establish HOAs. You're currently facing criminal charges for fraud and filing false police reports. That's when Detective Rivera stood up and showed his badge. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Detective Rivera with the City Police Department. We've been investigating reports of fraudulent HOA activities in this neighborhood. The room went completely silent. Sandra looked like she was going to be sick. Our investigation has revealed that Ms. Mitchell has been operating an illegal scheme to collect money from residents under false pretenses. She's been issuing fake fines, threatening non-existent legal action, and impersonating community officials. Detective Rivera looked directly at Sandra. Ms. Mitchell, you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, and impersonation of a public official. As the detective read Sandra her rights, she kept protesting her innocence. This is a conspiracy. They're trying to destroy legitimate community leadership. I've done nothing but protect property values. But the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showed Sandra had deposited over $50,000 in fake HOA dues and fines into her personal account over 2 years. She'd been using the money for personal expenses including a luxury vacation to Hawaii and payments on a BMW she couldn't otherwise afford. The fake documents she'd created were elaborate forgeries, complete with official-looking seals and legal language copied from real HOA bylaws. She'd spent hundreds of hours creating a fictional bureaucracy designed to intimidate and exploit her neighbors. During the investigation, we learned that Sandra had pulled similar scams in 2 previous neighborhoods before moving to ours. In each case, she'd eventually been caught and forced to relocate, but she'd never faced serious consequences because her victims were too embarrassed or intimidated to pursue legal action. This time is different, Marcus told me. We have organized victims, documented evidence, and criminal charges. She's not walking away from this one. The legal process took 8 months, but justice was finally served. Sandra was convicted on 12 counts of fraud, 6 counts of extortion, and 3 counts of filing false police reports. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to her victims. The restitution hearing was particularly satisfying. One by one, neighbors testified about the money Sandra had stolen from them and the emotional damage her harassment had caused. Mrs. Williams broke down crying as she described how Sandra's threats had made her afraid to leave her house. "Your Honor," Mrs. Williams said, "I'm 78 years old and I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. I never caused trouble for anyone, but she made me feel like a criminal in my own home." The judge was clearly moved by the testimony. "Ms. Mitchell, you preyed on your neighbors' trust and good nature. You turned a peaceful community into a place of fear and conflict for your own financial gain. The court finds your actions particularly egregious because you targeted vulnerable elderly residents and young families." Sandra's lawyer tried to argue for leniency, claiming she'd been trying to help the community and had gotten carried away with her authority. But the evidence was too strong and the victims too numerous for any sympathy. The defendant created a sophisticated criminal enterprise disguised as community service, the judge said. She forged documents, impersonated officials, and systematically defrauded dozens of families. This was not misguided community leadership, this was calculated fraud. The total restitution order was $73,000, plus interest and legal fees. Sandra's house was put up for sale to pay the judgment, and she was banned from serving in any HOA capacity anywhere in the state. But the best part came after Sandra was led away to begin her prison sentence. The entire neighborhood, all the families she terrorized and defrauded, had a block party right there in the courthouse parking lot. People were hugging and crying and celebrating the end of Sandra's reign of terror. Mrs. Chen brought homemade cookies. Tom Rodriguez had barbecue. The Johnsons brought their twins, who ran around playing with other neighborhood kids while their parents finally relaxed for the first time in years. "You know what's funny?" Mrs. Patel said to me. She was always talking about community standards and property values. But the only thing bringing down our neighborhood was her. She was right. In the months following Sandra's arrest, our neighborhood became the friendly, peaceful place it was meant to be. People started talking to each other again instead of hiding behind closed doors. Kids played outside without their parents worrying about fake violations. Families could enjoy their own backyards without fear of harassment. We never did form a real HOA. It turns out we didn't need one. When neighbors treat each other with respect and common sense, most problems solve themselves. And if something serious comes up, we can always call a community meeting and discuss it like adults. The house Sandra had lived in was eventually sold to a lovely young couple with a baby. When I introduced myself and explained what had happened with the previous owner, they were shocked. "We bought this house because the neighborhood seemed so peaceful and friendly," the husband said. "Everyone we met was so welcoming." "It is peaceful and friendly now," I told him. "But it took getting rid of one very toxic person to get back to that." My son Mike still works as a 911 dispatcher, and he says Sandra's case is legendary among emergency services. "Dad, we use your call as a training example of what to do when someone files a false report. The recording of Sandra claiming she owned your house is part of our training materials now." The irony isn't lost on me. Sandra spent years trying to control everyone around her, making up rules and threatening people with consequences she couldn't enforce. In the end, the only person who faced real consequences was Sandra herself. Sometimes I drive past the federal prison where she's serving her sentence and wonder if she's learned anything from the experience. Does she understand now that you can't build authority through fear and lies? Does she realize that real community leadership comes from service, not domination? Probably not. People like Sandra rarely change because change would require admitting they were wrong all along. And that's too big a blow to their ego to handle. But our neighborhood is better now. Kids play in the streets, neighbors help each other with yard work, and people decorate their houses however they want. Mrs. Williams has a beautiful garden that would have earned her a dozen fake fines from Sandra. The Johnsons let their twins play barefoot in the backyard whenever they want. And me? I planted a whole row of red roses along my front fence just because I can. They bloom beautifully every spring, and they remind me that sometimes standing up to bullies is the only way to stop them. The fake HOA queen is gone, but the real community she tried to destroy is stronger than ever.